Hey guys, so I'm gonna try to talk a little bit about what I've been up to over my career and use examples on like how iteration really affects growth, everything from product to paid. I'll get into my background just so you know I'm a little bit qualified and I've done things before. So I worked at Fetch, and there I worked on Inavo, Facebook Messenger, and Runtastic, helping them do things like get into China through Inavo, helping Facebook Messenger get into international markets, and then Runtastic helping them through their acquisition to Adidas. After that, I went into Anchor Free, where I started the growth team there and eventually grew the company until it got bought by Wonderco for, I think it was like 300 million. And then I left there, I think it was like 6-7 months ago, to work on Yaza full time. And then I also do a little consulting for different companies. Going into this, why is iteration so important? What is the big deal about it, right? So iteration is key to unlocking the growth and traction and retention and understanding what's going on, right? And knowing that nothing is really as easy as it seems. Like you go into something and you're gonna be like, okay, this is great, we got this. And then next thing you know, you're like, oh, we definitely don't got this. And you learn about that as you start to go and you iterate to the product. And then understanding that you have to adapt to get the success. And you have to adapt and change to be able to figure out how to get to the next step. And lastly, it's really learning and seeking about new opportunities and uncovering the stuff that you might not have even thought about being an opportunity unless you really started testing and trying different things. On my first example, I'm going to try to talk about different things, but one of the big ones is like, okay, well, how do you start from the product from scratch? Taking it from ideation to getting it into the store if it's an app, or getting it into, selling abilities if it's a different type of product. And one of the big things is, how do you make it usable? Right? You have this brilliant idea. Is it unique? Is it cool? But at the end of the day, it has to be usable and it has to be functional. And a lot of the times when you put something out first in market, even if you're alpha, if you're beta, it's not going to be usable because you have this great idea and then you get into it and people are like, what the hell is this? Like it just doesn't work like that. And what you have to do is you have to take it to your customers. And whether you're in your alpha and you have like maybe your beta testers, right? And your alpha testers, and you say, okay, well, what do you like about this? And then you iterate it and you kind of change things around until it starts to click. And then at that point, it's like, all right, cool. Now I can actually get into the store. I'm still not excited about it and I still am kind of embarrassed by it, but at least people can use the thing, right? And I think that's a really big and important aspect of it because, with Yaza, when we first started doing it, we were trying to cram so many things into this product that people got into it and they're like, why would I do that? Like, I don't understand how we're doing this. Like, do I click here? Do I click that? And because of that, we had to really work with our design team to really figure out, oh, you know what? Maybe we just simplify this. Maybe we don't even need to have the function to do this one thing, and that saves the time and it makes the posting easier and different things like that, and it will really make a huge impact. And then it's just really just making sure you have multiple tests and you're just always testing and you're talking to your customers. They're going to tell you what they want and they're going to be able to figure it out because of that. Next thing is, it's really making sure, adding to that is building for your users. And how do you get it? So once your app is live, how do you find those users? The initial stage is you have to find out what's the core use case of your product. And are you trying to grow organically? Are you trying to use paid media to get there? Are you a subscription app? Are you a social app like we are? And it's like, you don't want to do paid because it's not economical. So how you find those certain use cases? And, you can do different things. Like you use paid. You go out there and you knock on 100 doors until someone actually starts to use it, and then you start to understand, okay, this is what they use it for. Now we understand what we need to build, and we need to build for that specific use case and make it more and iterate to that. And that's something that's super important when you do it. And I think a lot of people forget about that because you have this great idea and you're like, no, I know this is a good idea and this is what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, if the users aren't going to touch it and they don't understand it and it's not being made for a certain use case, it's not going to work. And sometimes that use case isn't going to be the use case that you thought of. Like for us with Yaza, we didn't realize that real estate was going to be the big thing that they started using it on. And we're going out there thinking, we'll be a travel and location app, like getting people entertained. And it wasn't anything like that. Now we're like, all right, well, we have that aspect to it, But in the reality of it is that the realtors were actually the ones that had a use case that was economical for them, so they wanted to use it even more. And so then we had to look at, okay, well, now they're doing that. How do we get more of them? And how do we start to talk to them? And you go out there and you start to, do on the ground sales, talking to these realtors, talking to these people, getting them to figure out it. And then you figure out how to build the product around that. Moving on with this, where are we here? Oh yeah, so one really interesting thing is the smallest changes can make the biggest impacts. And the example I'm using for this use case is I was consulting for this small app, and they're like, what's just run paid? Everyone runs this type of app. It's a commodity app. It always does well. And they thought it was just going to be easy peasy. And we go out there and I'm like, well, I've seen a lot of design flaws with this product and I don't really know if this is going to work, but I'm willing to try because you guys are asking me to do this. And I did it, and everyone was starting the trial. It was click, trial start, awesome. And we're using paid media sources that are proven out for this type of product. And they work for everyone that used it, from big to small companies. But yet no one was finishing the trial, and no one was doing the subscriptions. So, we have to look back on that and be like, well, what is that issue? And, looking into it, then I was like, wait, you guys are asking for emails after someone starts that trial. Well, it's a privacy and security app. So people don't want to give up their emails, and so they immediately cancel the trial. And that little change was the difference of revenue and profitability versus it not even being a product. And you have to really look into what are these things that are in your products that could potentially do that, and how do you adapt to that, and how do you iterate to make sure that is, and what kind of data do you need to be looking at to go into that? Like your adjust or your MMP isn't going to necessarily tell you that information. Your amplitude might, right? So you have to really kind of figure out, all right, what product features and what product metrics am I tracking, and making sure that you're really looking into every little detail. And I think that's one of the big things about product in general, is just that it's so detail oriented in order to make it really, really work. And I'm fortunate enough to have a product person on my team that's meticulous, 50-page PRDs. and I'm like, all right, glad I'm not at the developers for this. But that's what it takes to get something of complexity out in the store to be usable. That's just super important. And when you go after all of this, you have the products. Iteration doesn't just fall into the product realm, but it also falls into the paid marketing realm. There's so many things and so many times when I was at Anchor Free and we're running media and we're trying everything. I was gray hat, white hat, black hat. I'm like, I don't care. Let's just figure it out. We got to do something. And we turning over every single stone that exists, and until we start to find things. I remember this one time we found a site ID, and I was like, I don't know what this idea is, but it's converting like wildfire, and I need to figure this out. And it was through one network, and then so we started researching it, then found out it was another network, and then we went to that network, and then we get into it, and we found out that it was just because this one network has an exclusive deal with this one source out of Iran or something, where was it? It was in Ukraine, I think. And I was do this traffic. I'm like, how much of this traffic do you guys have? Well, it ended up being they had $3 million worth of traffic a month. And I was like, and it was just converting for us like it was no one's business. And that was one of the biggest things that made our company grow the way that it did, because we ended up making an exclusive deal with them before all of our competitors even knew it existed. And it was just because we tested everything. And when we did find it, we just hunted it down and, made sure that it was ours, and really kind of focused towards that kind of stuff. And it's really, I think one of the things as I consult with companies lately is don't be closed-minded, because a lot of times people look at these things and they're like, no, you have to do an app install campaign on Facebook and you can't run it to a mobile website. And I'm like, do you know you're competing against every gaming company when you're doing this? And you're actually competing against B2B companies too. And you can't compete with that as a B2C company. And it's getting more and more expensive. When you run a mobile web campaign versus to an app install campaign, your CPCs drop to 14 cents. And then it's just a matter of how do you optimize the landing pages to make it actually work out for you. But if you close your mind off on that and you don't have any idea of like, oh, what could it be, you're never going to see that. And that's part of the, the open-mindedness, the iteration, all of that kind of plays into each other to really focus on this type of things. But it's also, testing smart. Don't just like pick everything, right? Because everyone, truthfully, a lot of it's the same, right? It's like you work with one network, you're probably working with all of them. You work with Facebook, your creatives are everything. And like same with Google, right? And so it's just, being really smart about it, but also being really creative about it and figuring out what is that going to look like and how does that play back into the product and your usability on the product and your actual use cases that are in the product, and that are you actually serving to your customers that are actually there, and trying to figure that kind of stuff out. And then one of my last examples, I'm probably going to end up running a little early on this, but is when I was at Anchor Free, and they recently just did a rebrand to Pango. And one of the reasons that they did this was because they realized that they had to adapt. And they had to survive, they had to stay big and they had to do more. And so they bundled up a bunch of things. So 1Password, a robocall block, the VPN, and because they knew that they needed to get the retention numbers up in order to be the size of the company that they wanted to be. And they had to adapt with that. They had to build around that. And they couldn't just fight every day to be a VPN when you have open source VPN code out there. And you can be, everyone's a VPN these days. There's probably 500 of them. And how do you stay on top if you're just giving the same service more or less to the users if you don't adapt and you don't look at the market and you don't look at kind of like where you can build things around? And it's really just kind of how do you stay at that next step ahead of everybody and applying that to your product, but also onto your paid marketing and onto your other sales tactics that you might be doing, and trying to figure out, okay, well, this is how we stay ahead. This is how we stay ahead of CyberGhost. This is how we stay ahead of all these big companies, or how do we beat them out on all these companies? Because we are thinking creatively and we're thinking innovatively, and we're being innovative because we're iterating and we're discovering things that people might not have noticed because they weren't looking at certain places. And that's where, I've seen just a lot of success with the things I've tried in my past, and really trying to kind of adapt to that. And just to wrap this up and talk about kind of like last things, is that you never know until you test it. And sometimes the biggest breakthroughs are when you least expect it. And, one of my mentors and good friends always says to me, innovation is discovered, it's not developed. It's not invented, right? It's just, people discover things. Like if you go back and you look at Slack, for example. Well, Slack wasn't initially the company. They were a gaming company. But they built out a tech platform so they could communicate to each other internally while they're building it. Now that turned into their company. And it's because people are innovating and they're really kind of looking into this, and then they iterate. You call it pivot, I guess, in like some instances, but it's really trying to look at that, iterate to it, and make sure that you stay ahead of the game and really try to win it out. And then lastly, it's keep an open mind, and then just listen to your customers above all. And know who they are and reflect with them. Don't abuse them. Don't just like run a 3-day trial on a yearly subscription and say, all right, great, I got your money, see you later, right? Because it's so easy to do that nowadays, but that is not how you're going to build a product that's going to get you the retention. And that retention numbers 1 month extra at scale could be double your revenue. And that's more important than, burning and churning on some like incense source that only lasts 4 months. So, it's really important to kind of look into that.